So you ready to take it to that next level with Vapor, huh? Trying to save some stuff? All right, well, let's get into it. It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be going over Fluent objects. And what Fluent is essentially, it's a middleman that lets you work with persisting data to either memory, which is built in, or when you decide to start working with real databases, things like MySQL, then you can actually easily access the data from your database. So today I'm going to show you how to create a Fluent object and how to just get everything up and running so that you can start messing with your Vapor, start making your APIs a little bit more useful. Nah, man. Oh, and before we begin, this is the third video in a series of Vapor videos that I'm doing. So if you're not familiar with any of this stuff, make sure you go back and watch the other two. I have them in a playlist and everything ready for you guys. Just get up and going. All right. So as you can see right here, we're just in the routes the routes file right now. And I just took out all that junk. Right now we're working with a new Vapor project. Working with the API, with the template of API template pretty much. So when you work with a new project on the API template, what you'll see is that your packages.swift or your package.swift file will look like this with the Vapor and the Fluent Provider right here. You'll also get the post model right here, which is junk. We're not going to be using that. And then, there's also a controller in there for post. Another thing that you'll notice is fluent.json file right here, which is showing that the driver is set to memory, which is pretty much just working with Fluent. And Fluent is kind of like when you're working with your iPhone and you were to save something to an array that you're going to be using in a table view, but if you're not like saving that data to like core data, Realm, SQLite, or like user defaults, then that information will go away. So and I'll go over that again a little bit later. And also the setup, you'll see in the configure setup that it has these two functions, setup provider and setup preparations, being called when setup's called, which are located right here. Now you want to make sure that fluent provider.provider.self is called, and the setup preparations, we're actually going to change this in a bit with our new object that we're going to create, but yeah, you'll also see that right there. So jumping right in, going back to the routes controller, what we're going to do is we're going to have two APIs. We're going to have the get users and a post users, right? So the first thing that we want to do is actually create a user object. Now over here in the models, I created a new file called user, but I haven't put anything in there. I just wanted to make sure everything is ready to go so that we could just jump right into it. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to import Vapor and import the Fluent Provider, because we are, once again, working with Fluent. Come on now. And all we really need to do is just create a class like normal, and the class will be called user, right? So this is what we would normally do in Swift, right? But there's one thing that there's a couple of differences that we just need to make right here. Now, when working with Fluent, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're working with final classes, which means that they can't be subclassed after that. So we could do final class. If you are going to be subclassing your object, it's going to get a little bit more complicated. And if you guys want a video on that, I could definitely cover it. But for the sake of time and really to just get you up and running, just start off with final class, like so. So it's not going to be subclassed, is pretty much what we're saying. And we also want to inherit from the model object, which is included with the Fluent Provider. Now, if you go ahead and do this fix-it, a couple of things will pop up for you. Now, you'll notice that there's storage. And what storage is like, if you're familiar with databases, there's usually an ID column. It's usually your first column, and it's the thing that makes everything unique. So you have row 1, which would be ID 1. Row 5 is ID 5, right? And this is essentially what helps handle that for Fluent, and makes Fluent so great, because it does all this for all the different databases that it supports. So we're actually going to have a storage object, but we're not going to be changing that. So we'll actually change that to a let constant. And since we always want to have an ID for each object that we create, each user that we create, what we're going to do is we're going to just say equals storage, and we're going to initialize a storage object like so. The next two things that you'll see are make row, which is once again making a row in the database. So it needs to be able to convert your user object, your Swift object, into a row so that it can be inserted into the database. And then it needs to be able to be initialized from a row. So it needs to be able to go down into the database, grab that object, that row, and then convert it into your object. So that's pretty much all that's going on here. I know it might be self-explanatory, but some people won't get it. So I just want to make sure that it's, put out there for everybody to easily understand. Now we're going to keep everything pretty simple. The user is just going to have a name. So let's just do it like we normally would, name, and that's going to be of type string. Right now, one thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be constantly working with strings throughout our objects. Anytime that you're working with Fluent, you're going to be working with strings throughout your objects, and you don't want them dirty misspellings like, oops, I spelled name N-A-E-M because I was typing too fast, and it's just going to drive you crazy when you mess up. So what I like to do, and what I see a lot in the Vapor community, is you create an internal struct. And that internal struct is just to make it so that you don't have any misspellings in your strings. So I'm going to go ahead and set up that internal struct right here just so that you can see what it looks like. And once again, I'll go back over it. Alright, so as you can see, it's a struct that's just called keys. These are all the keys, like all the keys are columns. Some people like to call them columns that would be in your table. And we just want to make sure that we never spell name wrong. So whenever we want to reference this, all we have to do is say user.keys, and since it's static, we can say .name, and that will give us that value right there. So moving forward, it makes everything really easy. So when we want to initialize from a row, all we have to do is just abstract that data using our key and set it to the value that we want to set it to. So all we have to do is say self.name is equal to, remember it's Vapor, everything throws, try row.get, and then you're going to pass in keys.name. Well, you got to make sure it's capitalized, keys.name, like so. And now you don't have to worry about misspelling that string. So that's all you have to do. And since we only have this one object right here that's uninitialized and storage is initialized, we only have to do that. Real simple. Keeping it real easy. Real easy. All right, let's go. So to make a row, all we have to do is say var row is equal to, you guessed it, row, like so. Very easy, very simple, very straightforward. So now instead of getting a value, we want to actually set a value on the row. So all we have to do is say try row.set, and then we're going to just choose any of them. They all do the same thing. And we're going to say keys.name. We're setting a value for this key or this column. And the value is going to be our name, which is, self.name or just name right here. And then all we need to do is just return the row that we just created and set a value for that key. Simple, straightforward, easy, right? Well, yeah, and it stays relatively easy actually. The next thing that we have to do is, because all this is doing right now is allowing you to create an object or create a user from a row and create a row from a user. So that's all that it's doing. But what good is all that stuff if you've never even made a table for your row to go into, right? So we actually have to prepare a table in the database, whether it's a real database like MySQL or it's just the Fluent memory database. So the way that I like to do it is I put it in an extension. You could put it up here if you want it, but I like to do it in extensions. It keeps everything looking nice and clean. So we do extension on our user, and what we're going to do is we're going to put in preparation, which is once again provided by the Fluent Provider, library or framework or whatever the hell you want to call it. right? And preparation has actually two different methods that you want to implement. Now, the first one, pretty simple, prepare. And all this is going to do is say it's just giving you a database, the database, so that you can prepare a table for this object, user. So all we have to do is say try database, which is being passed into us right there, and we're going to say just create like so with the closure. So we want to create a user database, so we'll just pass in self, right? And then we want to set specific values for the rows and notify the database what type of object is going to be, or what type of value is going to be in each of those columns. So we do enter, and you can call this whatever you want. I've seen it be called builder. I also see it be called table, but I think this is a little bit more self-explanatory, so I'll keep it as table. And all we have to do is just say table.id, and it's actually a function that's going to be called, and it's going to create the ID for us that makes it unique by accessing this storage object. Pretty cool, pretty simple, pretty sweet. And then the next thing that we want to do is we just want to do the same thing, but we need to specify the name. We need to specify what value is expected for the name column. So we want to say, well, that's going to be a string, and the name, that's not our name, it's just the name. What we're going to put in right here is going to be keys.name. So it's asking for the name of what the column would be, not for the username, just so that, hope that makes sense. So yeah, that's all you really have to do. And that's going to prepare the database, or it's going to prepare the table with two columns, one for ID and one for the name. Simple, straightforward. And then the other function is revert, which is essentially dropping a table. So all you have to do is say try database dot delete, and it's going to delete self. We want to delete this table. It's not deleting the database, which it kind of looks like it's deleting the database, but it's really just deleting the table. It's dropping it from the database. So yeah, so that's all you really need to do. Just a couple of functions, and you know, since all this stuff is like based off of protocols and stuff like that, you know, it's really easy to get implemented because Xcode does it pretty much for you. Pretty awesome, pretty awesome. So yeah, now all we have to do is just go back over to our routes right here, and now what we're going to do is we're actually going to post something first, and then we'll do get in a couple seconds. So what we want to do is we want to take the request, right, and we want to convert it to JSON because we're planning on passing up JSON. I mean, you could do it with whatever you want, but for this example, we're going to be using JSON. And if you want to know how to handle different requests, you can check out the last video because I talk about that. So we're going to get the JSON from the request like so. Else we're gonna be like, we don't like you, fool, you better get the hell on out. We're gonna say that's a bad request, right? And one thing that you'd probably want to do if you're working with JSON is you would actually, instead of, you know, parsing out each value from the JSON, what would be a better way to do it would be to actually create an initializer from JSON. So what we're gonna do is we went back over to our user object, our user.swift file, and we're going to say init with JSON of type JSON, and you know it's vapor, you got to throws, and all we're going to do is we're going to say self.name is equal to JSON, or remember try, we got to do try JSON.get, and then we're going to get, you guessed it, keys.name. Now once again, remember that you don't need to have the struct in there. If you wanted to just put a string in here and just type out name, that would work too. But this is the way that I like to do it, so I'm showing you how I like to do it. It's a little bit better, So now what we want to do is we want to create a user from that JSON, right? So let user equal, once again, try, because our initializer throws, user initialized with that JSON, baby, and like so, and we're gonna get our user, or we can create a string that says you have created a user with the name, and we'll just pass in a name right there. We'll pass in our user.name like that. So let's go ahead and run that and see if everything worked, because you know your boy did it right. All right, as we can see, everything looks like it's up and running and perfect, but I actually made a mistake. We actually want to go back over to our configure.setup and make sure that we're actually preparing the user table, because we're not preparing it yet. It's not being called yet. So instead of post, what we'll do right here is we'll just put user, or if you were using that, you know, just copy and paste it below and then put in the user, and that'll work. So let's go ahead and run that one more time. All right, build successful. So everything looks like it's up and running. This is, you know, the standard default output of Vapor. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up Rested, which is this app right here. And we're gonna go over and make sure that it's gonna be doing an API request on localhost 8080 as specified as the port right there. And it's a post request because we're working with, you know, once again, routes over here, post. And we're gonna make sure that this is JSON, because we expecting that JSON soon. So go ahead and type it in right here. We're gonna be expecting the key name, or the parameter name, to be name, and whatever we want the user's name to be. So user's name is gonna be Kyle. So now if I send that, oh, we're not getting back anything because I didn't specify which route we're using. So users, duh, Kyle, come on. Users, and then we do send request, and you have created a user with the name Kyle. Oh yeah, now that's pretty cool. Now if we go over here to our get, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to return all the users that we should have saved, right? The way that we do this is Fluent provides us with a very easy way to access and do like a query on all the objects. It's really simple and straightforward. All we have to do is say let users equals try. You select the object that you're working with, which is a user, and we say all, which throws, which we have the try, and then that will actually give us back all the users. So this becomes an array of users. See right there, it's an array of user. Now, if we try to say return users, that's not going to work because users is not response representable. Remember that this is our object and it only has the functionality that we have currently implemented. So what we actually have to do is we have to go back over to our user object. We need to go down to the bottom, or you could once again put it at the top if you want, but we're going to do another extension on the user, and what this is going to the extension that we're going to be adding is going to be JSON representable. And what that means is, well, first of all, JSON representable is, you know, essentially JSON, and JSON is response representable. So we're going to create something that we're going to add a function that makes our user turn into JSON, which is response representable, which allows us to return it to from the API. So if we just go over here and we do the fix, it's going to give us a function called make JSON, like so. And all we have to do is just, first of all, create a JSON object. So var JSON is equal to, you guessed it, JSON, just like that. And then all we have to do is set the values for the JSON that we're going to be returning. So try JSON dot set, and then we're going to say keys dot name, because that's going to be the key, or the parameter name, or yeah, the key of what we're going to be sending back, and the value for that key is going to be our name or self.name, however you want to return it. And then you just say return JSON. And once again, make sure that this is a var because you are modifying this JSON object right here. So yeah. So now if we actually go back to our routes, what we'll be able to do is, since we have this users right here, we'll be able to now say users.make.json, which is really cool because it worked even on an array. It works. It makes JSON from that array. So let's go ahead and mark that with try because it does throw. We're going to run that one more time. All right, build succeeded. And we get that standard default output. And we go back over to our rested. And let's go ahead and do a new window. Right here, we'll make sure that it's going to be on that port 8080. It's going to be a GET request. We're going to be calling the users API, and we're just going to do GET. Now, we get an empty array, as we expect, because it is running from memory. And I'm going to touch again on this in a couple of minutes, but yeah, we're getting an empty array as we would expect. Now, if we go ahead and put Kyle in here, and we do a send request with the this post request to the users with the name Kyle, we get another 200 right here. As you can see, it ran. And if we go back over here to our GET request, now if we run it, we're actually still not going to get anything because we missed one very important step, and I missed it on purpose. So, or did I? No. All you have to do is say try user.save. Simple, straightforward. Just make sure that you're saving that user, or else, it's not going to be saved to the database. You're just creating a user without saving it. So we're going to run that one more time. All right, everything looks like it's working perfectly fine. We're going to run the GET one more time. Now it's empty, as we would expect, because we haven't saved anything yet. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to save Kyle, we're going to post Kyle, and we're going to run this again. And now we get an array of user objects which just have a name. Now, if I were to go over here and add a couple more people, and I were to go back and make the GET request, you see that I get an array of users right here. So it's an array of user objects, and everything's being saved. So that's pretty much how you start working with Fluent. And remember that Fluent is memory based, so this is not persisted anywhere. It's just kind of sitting there in memory on the server, and you actually can't go to production with this on I don't think almost any server-side setup, especially not Heroku. I know that much. But you can't just work with Fluent. You need to work with like a real database, which I'm going to be covering probably next week. But you need to work with a real database if you're planning on saving stuff. But this is a great way to get up and running, just to make sure that all your data is working the way that you expect it. Because if I go ahead and I press play again and I wait for this to run, all right, build succeeded, and it jumps back up, and then I do GET. I send my GET request. Everything's going to be erased from memory. So remember that this is just like working with like a table view, and you're adding a cell to a table view. You have data in that array, but as soon as you close that app, like you force close it or you press stop on Xcode, all that stuff gets erased. So this is working from memory. But yeah, that's all you guys really need to know in order to get up and running with Fluent Objects. This should open up your abilities to really just start manipulating APIs, setting up your models, and really start structuring your backend so that you can start experimenting. And I actually would recommend that you don't even use a database until you actually figure out everything that you're going to be doing with all your models, because you don't want to just start saving all this test data and then have to go back and revert your database and all this other stuff. So it's better to just work with Fluent and all the memory stuff until you really kind of have your backend like solidified. So that's all we're gonna do for today. I hope you guys learned something new. Vapor is an awesome server-side Swift framework. If you learned something new, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I'm gonna be posting Vapor videos every week so that you guys are constantly learning some server-side Swift, baby. Now, if you guys want to recommend any videos for me to cover, make sure you drop a comment below. If you're interested in having a conversation, or you have a question about a bug in your code, then hit me up on Twitter. That's the easiest way for me to respond and have a conversation with you. If you're interested in what happens in your boy Kilo Loco's life, well, you can just check me out on Instagram. And, I'm here for you, baby. I'm here for you. So thank you again for your time, and make sure that you guys are writing that server-side Swift code all nice and sexy like your boy, and keep coding passionately. All right, guys. Later.